So it seems like you got a new mission together. Can you tell me what you guys are doing? Like I've heard you talk, Gary, I think a half dozen times at least.
Sure.
We've known each other almost 20 years. Last night was amazing, and I highly recommend anyone to be able to hear the two of you speak. Tell me, what's the mission? What are you trying to get out there? What are you trying to educate us all about right now?
Well, I have had the opportunity since meeting Gary and through people I've met, for example, the fantastic superintendent of Yellowstone National Park, Dan Wank, one of the finest protectors and champions for public lands you could ever want to meet. He has, and his colleagues have brought me in to help that organization with different issues, from resolving conflicts to planning programming and departmental organization to dealing with workplace safety and health. In that, because of mine and Gary's work, I have found myself speaking with them about the social ecology of their relationship with each other. I help people listen to each other across difference. And the fact of the matter is, because I'm in this body and he's in that body and you're in that body, we're going to have different ways of making sense. And so everybody is going to run into difficulty with communication. In organizations that are serving public lands, are committed to work like wilderness therapists, really any organization, but let's stick with those. If you wish to truly be of service, you must attend to the relational ecology, to the ecology inside yourself. We know how messy it can get in the workplace with relationships and how derailed beautiful missions can become. And so that's the angle that I bring to this.
Well, and I think what I'm bringing to this full ecology notion is this absolute conviction that there is the wisdom of nature in us. And by connecting to the wisdom of the natural world, and I'm talking about even specific ecology, biology, physics lessons that we've learned, the absolute value of interdependence, the fact that diversity in the natural world, in a natural system, predicts more than anything by far whether a system will be able to be resilient enough to come back quickly and vibrantly after a disruption. Those aren't just lessons that operate in the natural world, they operate in the human world as well. And so in terms of what Mary's talking about as far as relationships, at the point we mend this rift, this cleft between us and the natural world, we gain access to a tremendous level of reassurance, a tremendous amount of inspiration and intuitive power about how to act in a given situation. If we can learn to sort of get out of our own way, as Mary sometimes says, and simply tune in to that which is rising in us and has been rising in us for thousands and thousands of years, that gives us the power to really make the right choices, to get the sense of belonging and contentment that we so want and we so seek sometimes in other things like accumulating stuff and staying distracted with social media. The wisdom is in us, the wisdom is in the natural world, the encouragement is in the natural world.
It's all art. We need the science bit, but we really have to be able to improvise. And that kind of segues into the full ecology stuff that we've developed, because that's what that's about, that the natural world is in some ways all improvisation, because it's only ever right now. But it's also very systematic and deeply steeped in tradition that works. Mm-hmm. But it adjusts the tradition as need be. And so as we talk about full ecology, Gary brings depth in the natural sciences, and I bring depth in the social sciences, and those go together to be actually quite grateful to the natural world for being such a reliable teacher and companion.
We really are steeped, and we still are the progeny of men primarily who came up with this way of understanding reality by dividing it and parsing it, being objective observers. The whole notion of the objective gaze developed by the Greeks and made into an absolute obsession in the 1600s and 1500s by men like Descartes. That led to lots of good things. Physics became a way of understanding the world that allowed us to predict, and by being able to predict the natural world, we were able to harness it and build technologies. But we also got obsessed with the notion that this was the only reality. This was the only way to learn, and that's what the Greeks believed. And in fact, so all this improvisational skill, this messiness, this intuitive ability that we see coming up so frequently in wilderness therapy, and there's such respect for it in wilderness therapy, that has not been our culture's way of orienting to the world. Happily, science itself now is realizing that, really with quantum physics, that, oh, there is no such thing as a subject-object observation opportunity. We influence everything we study. And so we are starting to open up our rigorous science to the notion of mystery. Interdependence. But I think wilderness therapy has stayed grounded in that all along. They certainly are doing some wonderful research quantifying the effectiveness of wilderness therapy, but they also have stayed very true, I think, to the notion that a lot of what happens here is a mystery. It's messy. We see that it works, and we get the feedback from the students and our staff that it's a beautiful thing, but we don't entirely know why, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that's an empiricism that is vital to validate, to recognize in wilderness therapy, because there's an empiricism that comes from admitting that there's a bunch of mystery out there, and at the same time we can understand some things. So this separation, and we understand from our individual experience, the separation that Gary is speaking about became codified in epistemologies in ways we make sense.
Yes.
And it then got filtered through our lovely frontal lobes, bless them. I mean, I'm glad I've got a frontal lobe, but it's a tool. It's not necessarily the truth. But what we know from our own history, the three of us have European ancestry, what we know from that ancestry is that it got translated into things like the doctrine of discovery, manifest destiny. If I stand there, I own it.
After your talk last night, I had a hard time sleeping because it was just so, it made me think so much. And so one of the things that you're saying that's counter, or not counter, but I call this podcast Stories from the Field, Demystifying Wilderness Therapy. I want to say right now, I will never completely be able to demystify it, except that there's mystery, there's magic in this field that we are not going to be able to quantify. Because this is what I'm hearing from you, that quantifying everything, it's impossible. So just accept.
And please also understand, I am into the facts. I think of myself, I said this to my students, and it was helpful when I realized it this way, as an empirical mystic. You know, and if you think about what's happened in quantum mechanics or quantum physics, and in even looking in biology at this question of the missing link, these scientists get really close, and they think, oh, we've got it. And then the whole universe opens up. And they've got a little bit, that's a cool answer, but there's all this, it just goes whoosh, over and over again.
So I'm going to challenge now. So how would you, Mary, I want to start with you because Gary has had much more exposure to the field. How would you define, in your opinion, or wilderness therapy? What is it?
I think it's a deft weaving, and that the weaving then is a skill that supports being in the wilderness that is the wild experience of a lifetime. Whether you're outdoors or indoors, it's just wild. There are so many things you can count on, and that's part of what the grounding myths and the relationship that Gil Hollows talked about last night that we all are drawn to. So it's weaving skills for you drawing on relationship, but also for drawing on relationship with self. weaving skills for being in a body and in a way of making sense, and having both kindness and rigor and tolerance for mystery and uncertainty.
So, Gary, what is your definition of wilderness therapy based on your experiences?
Well, my definition of wilderness therapy continues to evolve happily. Through my relationship and work with Mary in service of full ecology, I have come to understand and appreciate more the wisdom of nature that resides in us. What Mary and I are doing a lot of is to try to mend the rift or establish or rekindle the kinship that exists between human beings and the natural world. That too is such an artificial parting that can also be traced to some extent to the Greeks and certainly to the Cartesian science. We are humans and that's nature. But nothing could be further from the truth. The wisdom that resides in nature resides in us, and I think wilderness therapy is about employing that connection to become available as a powerful tool for the individual to heal themselves, to find their calling, to establish peace and contentment, to be generative in the world, to mentor themselves and others. And I think wilderness therapy achieves all that and more by virtue of its ability to kindle in the individual that natural wisdom.